And I would like to begin by introducing Allah. So Dr. Allah Alhourani is our newest member of the department. He is officially the lecturer in specializing in Islam. His research project involves Islam, African publics, and religious values. He gained his PhD in the anthropology of Islam, focusing on performance and aesthetic formations of Muslimness in Cape Town, which also involved researching Muslim identity, politics of difference, and citizenship. So his research interests include Islam in Africa, Islamic studies, post-colonial critique, aesthetics, and the ethics of religion. And particularly is interested in aesthetics as both art and also a more expanded notion of aesthetics as a material culture. And today he's speaking on Islamic aesthetics and the ethics of giving, Sadaqah as a moral economy. So over to you, Allah.
Thank you very much, Louis, for this introduction. I'm going to share a PowerPoint, which will make my life and your life easy to follow me. I think you are seeing the PowerPoint now.
Yeah, we're seeing it in normal mode. Yes, now we see it in slideshow. Thanks.
Perfect. So just want to put this stuff here. So before I start this presentation, I just want to highlight that this is it's a part of my PhD project about Islam and Muslim in Cape Town that focus particularly on the aesthetic value of religious experience. And I try now to connect it to the question of ethics that also are fundamental in the way we study religion and how do we evaluate religion. So in this paper, I will put a simple argument that contribute to my overall project. I argue in this paper that, so I just want to see how I change. I argue in this paper that driven by Islamic ethics of giving and of caring about other and the social Muslim in Cape Town and elsewhere have historically contributed a range of social service to engage with social problem to Muslim and non-Muslim. These are historical phenomena, but with the aftermath, in the aftermath of colonialism and the rise of capitalism, which with the formation of modern nation state, Islamic reform had sought various ways to restore a moral economy based on Islamic ethics to maintain social solidarity and cohesion in majority and minority Muslim society. Now, Islamic reform of moral economy initial the modern institutionalization of Islamic giving through the establishment of various local, national, and transnational Muslim philanthropic organizations according to a bureaucratic rational conduct. That is what we call modern institution. Now, with the post-apartheid term, there have been a rise in Islamic philanthropy to counterbalance ever-emerging neoliberalism, and of course, the result that produced more poverty, and also to counterbalance the failure of post-colonial modern state to provide social service, and therefore many Muslim organizations being also established to provide social service. Now, this have attracted the scholar attention, and we have a scholar who thought of Islamic philanthropy as a political force of social change, and other scholars argue that Islamic philanthropy or Islamic giving constitute an economy of pious neoliberalism through providing social service, network, and infrastructure, and that contribute to a political project of a religious reform at local, national, and transnational level. So, in overall, this scholar preoccupation with the social and political impact of Islamic giving overlooked its religious significance. And here we see how religion is understood as social, as eminently social. And here Darkham come into the picture. And this is, of course, tell us about a secular formula of religion. Other scholars, on the other hand, had foregrounded the religious significance of Islamic giving, yet consider it merely as a giving for God that is non-compassionate toward the other, and that is non-political towards social sense and social solidarity. Now, a scholar foregrounding the religious inspiration of Islamic giving underplayed its social significance. And in this formula, we see privatization of religion as a personal belief. So here we have another secular formula. So I argue as the rationale of why I'm writing this paper, in this differentiation of religious value from the social and political sphere, which is at home with the secular classification of religion, had delimited the construction of Islam as an anthropological category. So I argue in this paper, and of course overall in my PhD, that by paying attention to the aesthetic experience of Islamic ethics of giving, this paper foregrounds the embeddedness of religious inspiration with one caring about other and the social commitment. And in this way, here we collapse the dichotomy between belief and matter, the dichotomy between religion and the secular, and in this way, we actually foreground religion at the center of the social and at the center of ethical formation. So this ethnography, the following ethnography now, will focus on the aesthetic experience of Mustadafin preparation, cooking, and distribution of a vast amount of food, which is acne, and which we distributed to a poor family the second day. Mustadafin Foundation is the Muslim philanthropic organization that provides a range of social service for Muslim and non-Muslim in Cape Town. So the discussion unpack how Mustadafin ethics of giving, it's an embodied politics of piety, inspire oneself relation to God, driven by its caring about the other and sense of active citizenship and social commitment. I argue that these various ethical dispositions toward the social, toward other, and oneself relation to God are mutually constitutive of Mustadafin ethics of giving, not competing and not difference, are very much merged and together. They all constituted. So I argue in this paper, actually, as I will now explain and support this argument, that Islamic ethics of giving is not reducible to oneself relation to God. It's not a private religion, private affair, to the exclusion of other and the social. No, it is a political act devoid of religious inspiration. And this, as highlighted in my brief review to the literature, these are the debate, either social or religious, but I try to paying attention to both. So after establishing the embeddedness of religious inspiration with caring about the other and the social sub-paper, consider Islamic giving as a moral economy. And I consider it as a moral economy on the basis that Islamic giving as an institutionalized practice of economy of donation and distribution, inspired. I see a chat. I hope somebody is sending a note for me. Okay. And these moral economy are inspired by religious value and moral social obligation. And very importantly, it had a long-lasting social and political impact. When we look at Mustadafin social service, we see that it accords with Thompson's definition of moral economy as being grounded upon a constant traditional view of social norm and obligation. The main point that why I am considering Islamic giving as a moral economy and not as a charity, in order to argue that religious values are integral to social life and to one caring about the other, not a private affair, not a personal belief toward God. Theoretical departure, I want to introduce you to a few points that I am trying to depart from, a theoretical point, and also to which I'm trying to contribute. The first theoretical point I depart from is the integral relation between aesthetic and ethics. And this is what I'm trying to develop in my project. I argue, of course, in this paper and in other paper, that the shaping of an ethical disposition, whether religious or otherwise, it's primarily an aesthetic experience of self-formation and imagination. So the formation of ethics, it's definitely, or to a great extent, rely on our aesthetic experience. Now, aesthetic are seen as a total sensory experience of the world, not merely as a representation, not merely as a material culture of religion, as a matter of representation and making religion public. No, I think of it as a total sensory experience, and that include a great deal of imaginative practices that collapses these differences and that invite us to look at the intersectionality and at the complexity. I also think of ethics as fundamentally co-construct with and in relation to other and the social. So our ethical and the way we make or perceive ourselves to be ethical are fundamentally in relation to others. My second theoretical point, which I hope to contribute to, is the consideration of Islamic ethics as an economy. And we will unpack this more in my analysis. But many scholars had recognized that Islamic giving, Islamic charity, Islamic philanthropy constitute an economy. I take this from them, although I also flag my critique against their work as well. My third theoretical point, to which my case study belongs, is the understanding that modern Islamic reform, on the one hand, to promote religious value as a force for social solidarity, and in some cases as a political project. And these are what Islamic modern reform had been advocating for, especially in the early 20th century, and that have been spread all over the world wherever Muslim. And of course, we could even see it in other religious groups. And these show us a return to religion, as some scholars argue. Of course, some scholars argue religion did not disappear to return, it's always been here. But we see now how religion is claiming social and political role. Modern Islamic reform as well initiate the modernization of the bureaucratic operation of Islamic philanthropy. So modern Islamic reform had learned or had borrowed the modern bureaucratic setting of the institution from Max Weber or from Enlightenment at all. So they had modernized their operation, and this modernization of their operation allude to a social impact and allude to a long-term political and social project, and therefore it's a conditional giving, as we will hopefully unpack in the coming slides. Now, these are my theoretical framework. I hope to bring it all together in my analysis. My ethnography, I want to now present to you an extract of my ethnography. My ethnography, it's a long term, it's a 7-year ethnography. I am still in contact with Mustadafin Foundation up to this day. I'm gonna present an ethnography that happened in the 2013. It was the last day of Ramadan, and that was when we had to cook a large amount of food. So now I'm introducing to you the preparation and the cooking of it. Now in the 7th of August, the last day of Ramadan, I joined Mustadafin of cooking 20 pots of acne, which we distributed to 4 families around Cape Town the second day, which will be the first day of Eid al-Fitr. We gathered at the main office of Mustadafin in Athlone at 9 a.m. We were 8 volunteers and 5 of Mustadafin workers. Shamima, from Mustadafin Foundation, welcomed us very warmly, and then she stated, along many things, she said, thank you for being here to help us make others enjoy and celebrate the Eid. Our community are suffering poverty and hunger. We are going to make for them a warm meal of acne. She also continue also now, after showing the social impact of our volunteers, she continue to say God will reward you and bring barakah to your life. So she already brought the social and the religious in the way she welcomed us and in the way she appreciated us being there and spending time there. We moved with Shamima to the back space of their office, where all the ingredients were prepared and packed on the wall. The meat was also taken out of the fridge and defreezed, and she allocated us to different roles, to peel the potato, to cut the onion, to rinse the rice, to defreeze the meat, and we had to switch these different tasks. There was a large South African flag painted on a wall, and that is can tell us about Mustadafin political commitment and social commitment, which we also will explain more when I present more ethnography. And of course, as all other Mustadafin Foundations, there is always a recitation of Quranic verses or an Islamic inshuda. Now, this task took us 5 hours. Most of the time, we were silently, each doing her or his job. The sound of the Quranic recitation threw us in a sensory experience of Islam that enacted self-formation and the politics of piety. It was the last day of Ramadan, which added a remarkable religious aura in our sensory experience of giving. Now, while the sound of Quranic recitation and the fact that it's the last day of Ramadan filled the space with an aesthetic of Islam, the South African flag, and part of our conversation enacted a sense of citizenship and belonging to South African nation building and to South African society at large. Now, amidst this sensory experience, participants had made different expression and different conversation. Of course, we were silently doing our job, but here and there is a conversation will emerge. I will introduce to you one of the participants who named Yusra. I had met her many times before with Mustadafin, other events like Youth Day, Women Day, African Day. In this day, Yusra, she studied at the Islamic College in Athlone, and she wore niqab. And she stated, among many things she said, you do sadaqah, God give you hasanah. Sadaqah in Ramadan is worth more. Sadaqah is based on love. It must be made with love. God knows your intention. Here we see that Yusra, while in the first line was counting her hasanah or her reward with God, in the second line, we see how Yusra also had a concern about other and have a relation with the other, intention toward about loving other. Yusra did not only limit her comment and conversation to a religious metaphor or to religious saying, but she also expressed her citizenship and belonging by saying, South Africa needs its youth. Our community suffered from apartheid and still suffering. We young, we can make change. And of course, Tara was there as well. Tara is a white South African who studied nurse, and she also volunteered. She's a Christian. She volunteered with Mustadafin. And she also expressed a sense of citizenship that, oh, we belong to South Africa, we are the new generation. But she also highlighted that this is also a Christian value to do good for people and God will reward you. Now, when we look at this sensory experience together, and when we want to look at the participant expression and conversation together, I see that they in common express their politics of piety and shared motive by being rewarded by God. Yusra was not the only one overt about her trading with God or her barakah with God. Many people were also mentioning that it's Ramadan and God will reward us more. So a scholar had considered this politics of piety toward God as a moral salvation of a moral economy of salvation. So we have an economy with God. Other scholar as well had highlighted that this voluntarism itself, not only an economy toward God, but it's an economic act that contributes to an economy, because the fact that you actually going there to work for 5 hours, that means you actually contributing to Mustadafin Foundation, maybe like 1,000 Rand or 500 Rand, and don't know how much you shall be paid for this, but these are an economic act. Now, they expressed a shared commitment and a sense of active citizenship. Like on the one hand, they were all concerned about religious value and reward by God. That was a clear that, but they all expressed their citizenship and active commitment to the society. Their religious motive were embedded with caring about the other and social commitment. And here again, my point that we can differentiate these different motives and we can't contrast or weight what is the intention of these people. Are they doing this for God or are they doing this for the society? We can't differentiate this because these are too complex and these are like too deep embodied in people motivation. None of them actually contrast or privatized one over the other. What also remarkable to notice here that yes, they do differentiate. I'm not saying that people don't have the social dimension and the religious dimension. They do differentiate. But when we speak about motive, it collapses and it becomes one. And that also make us to see religion as a motive for social commitment and for social solidarity. So people do religion, not only do it for God, but also they see religion as something can encourage them to do something to the society. Like now, before I want to explain more about the aesthetic experience in order to collapse this differentiation, I want to give you a brief insight. I can't provide details ethnography because of the matter of time. I don't know actually how much time I have, but now we went to the cooking. We left Mustadafin o'clock at 1 o'clock. I remained in the office a few hours there, and then we met at 9 o'clock at night to cook the 25 pot of acne. It was a festive time, fire, and people come around, even the donors come around to celebrate or to oversee what's happening there. Mustada Khairanisa was there, the founder, and of course she was walking around with those donors or even the executive of Mustadafin Foundation. So Khairanisa, she's the founder and the director, but there is a higher executive, like 7 people who put the plan of action and all this. And it was a festive time there again, and we have the same statement from the participants. And we have the same aesthetic regime, from the sound of the Quran to aesthetic of nationalhood, to aesthetic of citizenship, all are present there. And all are collapsing in this moment to constitute a very one motive of religious and social and political belonging and inspiration. I argue that aesthetic experience of preparing a large amount of potato, rice, onion, and meat through the participant in a total sensory experience of performing and forming a religious virtue, citizenship, and social commitment. aesthetic, like the sound of the Quranic recitation, the South African flag, images of women and youth empowerment, that's Mustadafin poster, images of caring about the poor, images of providing social relief, are all fundamental aesthetic form of Mustadafin performance. Now, these aesthetic form mediate and embody multiple belonging and identification. Now, Mustadafin aesthetic formation evoked a total sensory experience of being and belonging, oriented toward the self, toward the other and the social. Aesthetic experience of Mustadafin moral economy embody piety, embody a piety of caring about the other and the social. The other and the social do matter in Mustadafin aesthetic and ethics of giving. I want to introduce other ethnography about our distribution of the food, and that will give us a great insight about the Mustadafin caring about the other. But before I go to the distribution, here are a few pages about what we had described. Of course, this is the scene of cooking. This is me peeling potato, and the picture down here. I use again to teach drum and drama with Mustadafin. So allow me briefly to introduce you. How did I meet Mustadafin? I was a Secretary General of the Student Representative Council at UWC, and I was with Basma at that time. And Khairanisa's husband, who was Ahmad Qasim, who was the founder of Al Qibla organization, a political organization, came to with BAC, with Basma, came to welcome us to the SRC as an outsider politician. And then he learned I'm from Palestine, and then they support us financially. And then I got to meet Khairanisa. So I met Khairanisa in a very much political situation. And the first day, actually, I was at that time a student, so they offered to support in my fees. And I end up teaching foreign drama and the drama. This picture, it's in African Day in Delft. These are my class. And in this day, we go outside of the class and we perform in the street. Now, because of my relation with Mustadafin, I become part of the organization. So it's not like I'm a researcher. I'm really a participant observer now. I am there. I'm observing the plan of action and the preparation of the action. So I convinced Mustadafin Khairanisa to make a mass iftar for Somali, which I did it as a performative ethnography. And then Khairanisa agreed, and we invited 400 Somali. Khairanisa made it clear that Ala, please, we need Somali women to be there. I explained to the Imam of the mosque, Sunni mosque, and explained to the chairperson of Somali Association, please invite women. Okay. At the day, Khairanisa arrived with 5 women from Mustadafin, and there were no women in the mosque. And even Khairanisa and Mustadafin women were not allowed to enter the mosque. They ended up standing outside serving the food. Khairanisa was somehow upset and disappointed. I met her a few days later, and then she explained that our task is to empower women and youth. And this is the main task for Mustadafin. The main mission for Mustadafin is to empower women and youth. Now, feeding, it's another program for them, but their main program is to empower women and youth, a long-term project. They wanted to break their fast with Somali women. They wanted to know Somali women. So here I argue that Mustadafin aim of knowing and collaborating with Somali women show that Mustadafin ethics of giving, it's compassionate in relation to other and political towards social change. And here I, as you remember my literature review, I totally disagree with Meter Maya title of the book, or Meter Maya title of her article. And this shows us again the social impact of religion. Now, in my conversation with Khairanisa, she made it clear that Islamic ethics of giving Islamic, that she was inspired by Islamic giving and her active sense of citizenship. She established Mustadafin Foundation in the 1986, again to empower women and youth. Now, Khairanisa joined Al-Qibla organization when she was a student in the university. Her two brothers are Al-Qibla. Again, she married the founder of Al-Qibla, Ahmad Qasim. And in her work of Al-Qibla, she became involved in the township. So in order to make her project in township more institutional, she established Mustadafin Foundation, and she was mainly concerned about the women's situation. Now, I have a long statement by Khairanisa, which I can't present here, but if we want to pay attention to Mustadafin concern about the other, about their long plan, their institutional operation, their transnational and international network, its funding, its social service, we can think of Mustadafin Foundation as a moral economy that was strategically established to empower women and youth. Now, it is also, I want to, before concluding now, offer a historical background to my study and to this case study. Now, historically, women had played fundamental role in establishing Islamic moral economy. It's not a modern phenomenon, by the way. So in a beautiful article by Areen Salma Al-Qadisi, and in this article, Al-Qadisi looked at how Sufi women from the 19th century to the 13th century established Sufi lodge in various places. And they established Sufi lodge to offer service and social service for divorced women, or also for women who are not married, or for old people. But you need to realize here that Sufi men always prefer not to work and to prefer to devote their life to God and to poverty as an ideal type of devotion. Yet she showed us in this article that Sufi women actually managed to balance their piety, but also their worldly interest, like keeping their business. And by this business, they supported their male relative who are Sufi scholar or who are Sufi discipline, but also they provide a social service for the community at large. And on these spaces, Salma Al-Qadisi argued that women played a fundamental role in the economic setting of Sufism through their institution of donation and charity. It is also important to realize in the case of my own study in Cape Town that the Awal Mosque and Madrasa in Cape Town were built on a land that was donated as a waqf, as Sadaqah, as Islamic giving, by a Muslim woman with her name Sarji Van de Kaap. She was the wife of Abdul Qadir Abdul Salam, who had built the mosque. So the first Sadaqah, the first institutional waqf in Cape Town were made by women. Now, in Cape Town, we gonna take you in a short history in Cape Town. More mosque and madrasa were open to provide for the growing Muslim community now in Cape Town. Many African people joined Islam, and when slavery were abolished, many people convert to Islam. Many people also came to Cape Town, so a growing community needed more mosque and madrasa. Mosque and madrasa provided social service, provided Islamic discourse, provided a sense of community. So here we see a moral economy. Now, in the 20th century, and here looking at the work of the Prof. Abdul Qadir Tayyub, his work on Muslim youth movement, and in this book we see how in the 20th century, modern Islamic reform in South Africa initiated the modernization of Islamic institution and practice, including mosque, madrasa, and Islamic political and social organization. Here they were inspired by Islamic reform, by Islamism that happened in Egypt and in India, and then Muslim took this approach like many other Muslim minority all over the world. And of course, they established different Islamic philanthropy. Now, Prof. Tayyub had a beautiful quote in this book to explain my point, but I choose one small line here. For Tayyub, on the basis of modernizing Islamic philanthropy again, the establishment of SANZAF, that is the South African National Zakah Foundation, the institutionalization and nationalization of Zakah. Now, Zakah in South Africa, not now some Muslim here and there gives their Zakah, become an institutionalized and nationalized. And through this, according to Tayyub, Muslim youth movement turned this pillar from personal duty to a social obligation. So here, the point I want to make, that modern Islamic reform had turned Muslim piety from only a piety toward God, a personal duty, to a social project. And we see this in Cape Town as well. We have another significant study that's been made about Somali in Cape Town, Somali in Johannesburg, by a political, from political study. She made Sadoni, she made a study about Johannesburg, Somali in Johannesburg, and she argued, and I quote here, Islamic NGOs and faith-based organizations become economic actors once they contribute to the development of a community life in Johannesburg. It is this moral economy that can serve as the basis of religious, of community governance. So this author here already theorized Islamic giving and Islamic philanthropy as a moral economy. I was happy to read her book, but I was a bit sad because I thought, wow, I'm contributing to the debate. And then other scholars already had sort of the same thing. It's okay. They're supporting my argument. Now, I want Islamic moral economy in Africa. Of course, Islamic moral economy dates back to the Prophet Muhammad time. So it's from day one of Islam. And of course, it's important to notice that Islamic moral economy is even not only an Islamic phenomenon. All religious traditions have an ethics of giving. And it's also nice to notice here that the term Sadaqah is very similar to the term used by Jewish tradition, but in Jewish tradition, they call it tasaddaqah. And in fact, tasaddaqah in Arabic is the verb of doing sadaqah. So we could see here that the notion of giving, it's a religious ethics across different religious tradition and across different civilization and history. In Africa, which is my case study and my field of expertise as Islam in Africa, we see that since the 11th century, Quranic school and mosque provided social ground for collective identity and a sense of community among Muslims. From 17th century on, as the message of Islam started to reach rural area, farming became an important dimension of the political economy of Islamic scholarship. Of course, now from 11th century to the 17th century, Islamic moral economy were more relying on a trade business. But in the 17th century, we see farming become fundamental. By farming, like Sufi lodge were starting to open, and they were offering land for those scholars, for those discipline, for those people to come and use the land. Since the 18th century, Sufi lodge, Sufi ordered open various lodge. Of course, now, they become more expert in the trade now. They open various lodge to provide food, accommodation, land. They open market, commercial network within and across Africa. So now they control the carnival, the trade carnival from East and West Africa. And this trade carnival was like serious business, serious trade happening in Africa. Now, it is important to know that this 18th century phenomena, when Sufi embodied their piety with social, economic, and political constraint, it was also a response to colonialism at that point. And in this way, Sufi order constituted alternative economy and constituted a force that to some extent and in certain contexts had countered colonialism. Now,
Hello?
Yes.
We have about 20 minutes left. So if you want to wrap up in the next 5 minutes, we'll have some time for questions.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm also keeping my time alone, so I'm wrapping up in 2 minutes.
Okay, lovely. Thanks.
Just to make this trajectory clear, in the 20th century, we have the modernization of Islamic giving, where modern Islamic reform turned Islamic giving from a piety toward the poor into a conditional giving, aim for social solidarity and the strategic project of individual and social development. It is on this basis now that I think of Mustadafin Foundation as an example of a religious moral economy, of a modern reform that operates according to rational bureaucracy with the strategic aim of women and youth empowerment. And Mustadafin moral economy is driven by a sense of active citizenship and social commitment, underpinned by Islamic ethics of giving and of caring about the other and the social at large, which are embodied aesthetic politics of piety inspired to God. So that is my final actually statement to make. And in this way, I try to show that these different motives are constitutive of religious moral economy. More importantly, religious moral economy are fundamentally to be understood as a religious intervention in the social life in our post-colonial society to counterbalance colonialism, capitalism, or the post-colonial state itself. And with this in mind, we can see and appreciate what religion contributes to the society at large. I stopped sharing and I'm back to you now. And yeah, that was my final point. Thank you very much. You are muted, yeah.
Thank you, Ala. Thank you very much. We'll take questions. And please raise a hand. But while people are formulating their questions, I was thinking of many things in your presentation, Ala, particularly both the difficulty in differentiating yourself from the secular kind of urge to distinguish between, you know, the social and the political, and wondering how you're going to theoretically explain that non-collapse into those sort of binary categories. And well, there's one thing just saying these things in the sense of clearly, you know, there's a difference between something called religious, but then you have to start defining what religious is. And then when you say religious ethics, you're going to have to sort of like talk a little bit more conceptually about what you mean by ethics rather than just, you know, giving and demonstrating the giving. You know, you're in conversation with deontic ethics, utilitarianism. So what is it that religious ethics kind of is defined? And I don't expect you to answer these questions right now, but just some considerations. The other thing that came up for me was the use of the word economy. Now, as you'll know, this comes from the Greek oikos, meaning house and household management. So is it useful to use the word economy next to the idea of moral? When Aristotle is using the term economy or ekos or oikonomia, he highlighted 4 types of economy. The royal economy, the governmental economy, the political, and the personal. So there's some quite interesting things you're already doing conceptually that showing that the word economy kind of overspills into lots of different areas. And then other interesting comments is the difference of the religious act of giving in comparison to all of the countless other NGOs that do, work around the city. How do you define that as religious, in the sense that you've kind of shown it and you've said it, but is it because the causality for the motivation behind the act is different? So again, sticking with Aristotle, the idea that the material cause or the original cause and the final cause seems to be different, i.e. I'm doing this not simply to help my other human being, but one, that God wills it, and there is a benefit both to myself and society, i.e. the final cause is actually operated according to a wider conception of goodness or piety, which is a religious category, not a social or economic. I'll stop.
Perfect. I have three good points from you. Let me take Prof. Oka point, and then maybe I respond to both of you. Please, bro.
Well, Louis has exhausted all the questions. I'm sure it will take another seminar for you to be able to talk about the questions or to find responses to it. Actually, my first question was the way in which, thank you, this is quite interesting. It seems at the back of my head, it was deja vu. I've had it before, but I don't know whether it was in my dream or in some kind of prophetic trance that I've had this kind of stuff and so on. So I'm fairly familiar with some of the details, but I have no idea the context. My question was to be the way you use economy, and Louis has already said that you use it in such a way that I am beginning to say it could mean anything. It's like, a hold up, you can throw anything into it, and whatever you say, it is economy. That's the way, actually, part of the literature, that's the way scholars have used it. They say the moral economy of HIV/AIDS in South Africa is the title by Natras, title of a book. You can say the moral economy of anything that you like as well. But what is this economy all about? And second is what's the difference between moral economy and religious moral economy? Because you did use these two separate concepts, and I think they are really concepts. Is there any way that moral economy is different from religious economy?
My God, thank you, bro. That's like a good thing to think about while I'm revising this paper. So to just briefly respond to Louis' first question, about the differentiation between the religious and the social and this differentiation. So what I am dealing with here, it's we have on the table the secular theorization of religion, which initiates the differentiation and the diversification of religion and other. And this differentiation, initial contrast, and this was all ideological in order to relegate religion to a certain inferior position. More important, to show that ethics had nothing to do with religion. So my work fundamentally trying to collapse this differentiation. So I did not make the differentiation. The differentiation, as we saw, it's how scholars who use Durkheim, who use Max Weber, who use secular theory, they end up thinking of religion as different from other spheres of life. By focusing on the aesthetic, I saw that, okay, we could look at the entanglement. Economy. Now, Louis' question, I am an anthropologist. I like to look at philosophy and consider philosophy, and I always think that you keep corrupting my mind or benefiting my mind of philosophy. You keep bringing this to my attention. But I look at economy, and that will take me to Prof. Oka question, first I try to enter to the debate. A scholar had looked at the politics of piety as an economy and had looked at the giving itself at the social level. There is an economy. Giving, Islamic giving constitute an economy at the social level as it's institutionally practiced. This is my question to the first question of Prof. Oka. So I look at economy mainly as something, an institutionally practiced, and this institution had a network, long-term plan, and have a money coming in and distribution, donation and distribution, and more important, it's conditional giving. It's not only a giving to do for God or just to feel the poor or because you feel bad about the poor. It's an economy because it's sustained and it had a social impact. So when we look at the institutionalization, we consider it as an economy. So I try not to pay attention to the other scholar argument that even our relation to God is an economy. I recognize this, but my paper take the direction to which we look at economy as money coming in, money distribution, and social service, and it is in the structure of the society. Now, both you had the same question. What is the difference between secular giving and religious giving? This is an easy to answer, but Prof. Oka question was difficult to answer. What is the difference between religious moral economy and the moral economy? Let me first answer the first question. Maybe it helped me to get to the second. So secular giving have been criticized because it's very much based on charity, and these include hierarchy between you and the other. So secular giving have been marked on this humanitarian reason, humanitarian giving have been criticized because it do reproduce a hierarchy between the giver and the receiver, and this initial again reproducing the power relation. And that means the receiver had to say thank you to you, to the giver. Religious giving, on the other hand, we don't look at the, we look at the ideal of it, how a religious discourse, religious ethics is. Religious giving ideally do not constitute an economy between the giver and the receiver. Actually, you're not supposed to know who donates, and the giver don't know who's the receiver, because again, he's giving for God. So this may be what constitute the difference. Now I hope I answered the first question, that secular giving constitute a hierarchy, religious giving don't have a hierarchy. Now, moral economy, it is the economy that have the ethical question on mind. And when Samson spoke about moral economy, he was criticizing Adam Smith's political economy that do not concern, that do not have an ethical relation toward the other. So your question, Prof, is a bit difficult. I wonder if religious moral economy add anything to moral economy. Also, you know very well, as I learned this from you, that even the notion of moral economy, who were popularized or coined by Samson in his political study about class, were also borrowed from a religious background. So I need to think about your question of my use of religious moral economy and the moral economy, and to see if I can see something different, or I can say that, okay, just a moral economy. But thank you for the question. Unless you want to answer now, I will appreciate it. If you want to help me answering.
No, yes. No, I don't have an answer. I am not the one making the presentation, it is you. But I think that the order of things, we've got salvation economy and so on. And again, you're right that it's from, it used to be a theological concept that was moved into social analysis and historical kind of interpretation. But the issue is simply religious moral economy. It is religiously driven. There should be a degree in which you can now point to that relationship, or if you like, call it commandment or recommendation from a meta-social world or meta-social realm about how humans or believers or followers should order, should arrange, should create a network that sustains themselves or sustains that kind of institutional kind of thing. That would make the difference between moral economy, but moral economy indeed interrogates, is always in juxtaposition with capitalist economy, capitalist kind of thing. That is the sense, that is the context in which it has its own traction and force of analysis. This is my own way of looking at it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I was actually thinking there's similarities with Tammy's work, this kind of complex nature between the individual and the social space around them in both acts and structures. Leo?
Oh, okay.
Leo, then Azanze. Are you with us, Leo?
Yes.
Hello.
Hi, Ala, thank you so much for the presentation. Mine is just like a clarification. When you say modernization of giving, you use that a number of times. Could you really explain what you mean by that? What do you mean by modernization of giving and all that? That's one. And again, maybe I also need some clarity when you say piety and the idea that okay, it's driven by maybe sense of reward from God. Yes, I agree. And at least it ties into the notion of, in quote, of religious motivation. But I still think that we need to zoom in further and also look at reward from other human beings. Yeah, it's like when, you know, in one of our classes, you were talking about those who dedicate themselves to a life of holiness, but they go out and they're taken care of not by God, they're taken care of by other human beings. So there is also a sense of reward, you know, from other human beings, you know, apart from that embedded sense of reward from God, in quote, because, you know, for me, I don't know what you mean by reward from God. I don't know how to measure it, and I don't know how to get it. So I'm trying to say, in this sense of reward embedded in the economy of piety, it is important for us also to underscore reward from other human beings, even though that reward may not just be spelled out, you know, as in maybe, if you can say the other there's a capitalist economy, you know, you put this, you get this. Okay, so I'm looking at it that there is also a need for us to look at the sense of reward from other human beings within that moral economy explanation. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, your second point is very much about what I am arguing in this picture, in this paper. It shows us the intersectionality and the complete and the entanglement between reward from God and reward from social. In fact, one of the book which spoke about soup kitchen, Ottomani soup kitchen in Jerusalem in the 15th century, she highlighted how much it's produced power for the Ottoman Empire. In fact, she argued Ottoman had the power to feed people, but by feeding people, they fed their own power. But she have a beautiful statement in her analysis when she said it is actually so complex and so difficult to really unpack people's intention. Like if I can't unpack people's intention while I'm doing participant observation, I don't really know everything going on Yusra's mind, that she's doing this for God or doing this for the society. But from the statement, we see intersectionality and we see different motives coming together. Your first question is very important as well. What do I mean by modernization? So in the 20th century, like 1953, Sayyid Qutb wrote a book, Islam and Socialism, regarding Islam and socialism. Now, modernity that had a certain bureaucratic structure, certain rational bureaucracy, been adopted by religious group. So religious group in the last 100 years had used the philosophy of enlightenment, the rationality of it. So they had used media, they had structured their institution according to a rational order. How we structure the hospital, how we structure the university. This is the institutional structure that modernity at the beginning had imposed on the public sphere. You either be according to this institutional or, yes, Louis. So just to brief, so by modernization, mean adopting a rational bureaucracy. This is like according to Max Weber, a rational bureaucracy, which mean long-term project, which mean maximum output, all this.
We've run out of time, but we have two questions. If we could take the questions from Tammy and Azanze, did you have another question? And then at least Allah can think about them I don't know if he'll have time to reply, but Tammy?
I have a lecture in 15 minutes, but I can take one more question. Tammy,
okay.
Please.
Tammy. Okay. You hear me, Anna?
Yes.
I get that we can't ask questions about intentionality because it sets up the framework to be quite linear and directional. But I wonder if thinking about the intentions that people perhaps have, if you could think about this space as a field in the Bordeaux sense, that people can come and invest a myriad of intentions and motivations into it. We can't observe it, we can't sort of extract it, but it is a space nonetheless for that. And what that could provide for you to think about all these relationships.
Yeah, somehow my work at some level do not draw on notion of field as meant by Boudreaux, because again, Boudreaux are an architect of differentiation. So he produces different field. I take from him certain point, but again, my argument that we can't look at different field. When we look at the aesthetic, we look at a great deal of complexity coming together. But I mean, we don't know intention. I mean, we don't know the complexity. We don't know the imaginative exercise of people are sitting there. So we can't say that these people are giving for God, for example. We can't say that, oh, this giving, it's only for the society, because there is a different factor constitute this giving. And I try to show that these different factors are all coming together to form this motive of having Mustadafin, of volunteering with Mustadafin. So I don't agree that there is different field. This is what I'm actually trying to move beyond. And I try that there is a field of ethical formation, and this ethical formation invite different identification and belonging to form the one self. But it's not like we move from religious field to the science field to the aesthetic field. These different fields are secular project. Max Weber, the different field, Glevert Gears, Bordeaux. I tried to say, no, we want to bring all this field together. Thank you for...
Thank you. We're going to have to end there. But thank you very much, Ala. Very informative, and we look forward to how you develop these projects in the next few years. And hopefully we'll have lots more future discussions. I'd like to highlight in 2 weeks' time, we have Professor Michael Walsh giving a talk on sacralizing the state, sacralizing the state, where if some of our approaches to religion are often seen as somehow protectionist, i.e. we always see religion as a minority that needs to be protected from the state, Professor Walsh is going to remind us that in the case of China, actually what you are going to get is the religion joining the state as a totalizing force and giving sacred power to the state, which brings state sacredness, sacrality. So that will be an interesting comparison between Ala's talk and Professor Walsh's next week. But thank you, everybody.